I would like to state for the record during this videotaping that I am in the process of writing my own autobiography. I've been doing that for several years, and now I understand that my chances at a Pulitzer are going to be greatly diminished by the fact that you are making a video now of this. You may win the Oscar, but I will lose out on the Pulitzer. A lot of the stuff that I put in my autobiography is very detailed and analysis, and I think it's important that I withhold a little bit of it so that the heirs of Vincenzo Roberto Libbonanti will have a chance to read it in print to get the full story. The full story is always going to be better than the video.
Did you listen to any music when you were in elementary school? Or when you were a younger child?
I grew up listening to my brother's music because they were teenagers, and so my first music was Frank Sinatra, and of course then there was Elvis Presley, and I love
Four Seasons.
Four Seasons, Kingston Trio, and I grew up in the 50s with a lot of 50s music, and then 60s music.
Music during your late childhood and adolescent period. What were some of the big band songs coming out that you remember you would listen to your friends with or whatnot?
Yeah, they were just the pop songs of the 50s and 60s. Of course, my mom enjoyed music and dancing her whole life, and she was more out of the swing era, the 40s and the late 30s. And she would have records, Glenn Miller type music, and she would always be dancing to Charleston in the house and showing us how to do it. And I was always listening to those records. Then when I got maybe in 7th grade, 6th and 7th grade, I started enjoying the pop music of the time, which you always hear on the oldies and goodies channels now. And I had a quite extensive 45 RPM record collection, both myself and my sister. And one of my dad's friends, who Mama can remember his name better than I could, his job was to go around to the vending machines and record machines that they'd have at places where you could put a dime in or a nickel in and play a song, and he would rotate the records off that. And after a while, when the records got old enough, he would had a little outlet back in an alley, a little storage room that he'd sell the records, whoever could find his little outlet, for like 25 cents, and you could have the record. And I remember walking home from St. Mary's Parochial School, often going by his outlet and perusing through the records, and I'd get a lot of my RPMs. I can still remember a lot of the songs, but they were just the hits of the 50s and the 60s. And my sister and I would always be listening to music and singing.
Such as? Elvis, I'm guessing?
Yeah, Elvis, somewhat. Neil Sedaka. Some of the older ones, I don't remember the band name or the group's name, but I can remember the songs, which I can't think of right now. Karina.
Frankie Valli?
Yeah, the Four Seasons, but that was almost into high school. This was like the late 50s. 60, we could put the radio on and I could tell you all of them. Del Shannon was a big name. Neil Sedaka was a big name. Del Shannon had the big hit, I Wonder. Is that how it goes? My Little Runaway, that was the name of the song. Yeah, that was my musical interest. I loved listening to music.
Neil Diamond? Oh.
No, he was later. He became popular in the later 60s. I could, if you want to, I'll think about it a little bit. I hate to take up time trying to think of it, but.
And I remember being in 6th grade, and the top #1 song was Sugar Shack. There's a cute little girl. You know that song? You better sing, not me. waiting for me. And my brother Tom says everybody likes that song because it has a
to that sugar shack.
woo. And my brother Tom says the reason why it's popular is because it has a good beat and the kids can dance to it. So I remember him saying that. But 7th grade was a whole nother thing. It was amazing going from 6th grade to 7th grade because then we had dances at school.
So, going through high school, hanging out with friends, driving somewhere, what kind of music would you have on the radio then?
It was whatever was playing, which was only one station, maybe two if you could pull in San Luis Obispo, but it would be the pop song.
Beach Boys? Well, that was later in
Yeah,
your
it was
life.
a little later. I remember listening to KLY, which was the name of the radio station. A thing that they did back then and they don't do now would be dedicating songs. The Shirelles were big back then.
Mm-hmm.
They had a lot of hit records. They would dedicate songs. You could call in and say, would you please play such and such for Roberta and I, or the girls were usually calling in and asking songs to be played dedicated to guys. And I can remember listening to the radio music in the evening time sometimes and listening to the songs. And I remember Tom Morrison was the disc jockey who would always work for KLY and do the dedications. That was a big thing, dedications. Listen to see who was being named and who was together. This was like I was 12 or 13.
Okay.
And then the Beatles arrived.
What year was that?
1963. Oh my god.
The British
gosh.
invasion.
Yeah, the British invasion. And I was a Beatlemania, and especially Paul McCartney. I had pictures and posters all over my bedroom. I knew their birth dates. I knew what their favorite color was. And I remember Tom saying to me,
And this is pre-adolescent.
this was 7th grade.
Yeah.
So I was
Right on the cusp.
11, 12, yeah. And I remember me spouting off all this information to him and about the Beatles, and he said, Beatles, you'd have straight A's. I remember him saying that.
Yeah, it became the Beatles and the Rolling Stones.
And then, of course, one day our pastor and his wife were over, and she looked in my bedroom and she saw the Beatles thing, and she said, they're atheists, you know. And I didn't like her after that. I still like the Beatles, but I don't like her anymore because John had said something like they were bigger than Jesus.
Oh, that was later on.
Well,
that was not in 1963.
No, so I don't know why she said that, but she probably, like all rumors get started.
It's because they had long hair.
And you look at that hair now, and it really wasn't that long, but that was like what? Well, Elvis started it with the sideburns, and the shaking the hips, and that was like, oh my gosh. And then the Beatles came with the Beatle haircut, and that was every boy I knew wanted their hair like that.
I can remember my first time I heard a Beatles song. I probably told you this. I was on the freshman basketball team, and it was like in December of 1962. And we were doing layups, pre-practice drills. Paul Washburn and I, who I became friends with at El Camino. And they'd have music blaring over the auditorium speakers. And I heard She Loves You, Yeah, 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 and the other first Beatles song being played, and I thought, wow, that's sort of catchy tune. It was fun doing layups to that kind of music. And that was the first time I'd ever heard of the Beatles. It was, again, 1962, 61, while doing layups at basketball practice.
I was a big fan, like I said, and Paul McCartney was my boyfriend. Maybe that started in 6th grade. No, you know what it was? Debbie Bennett was still my girlfriend, but she had to go to a different junior high because they moved on the other side of town. Because her and I, it was really cool because I liked Paul and she liked George. So there was no conflict there. Because I had another friend that liked Paul too, and we used to argue all the time on.
Well, I would think you'd argue more if you had different ones? The same.
No, because it was like, well, he'd like me best. No, he'd like me best. No, you know, that type of thing. You can't like him. I like him. You know, so.
I remember the Rolling Stones' "Satisfaction" and "Get Off My Cloud" were the big songs my sophomore and junior year, because we'd always listen to them while we drove around the car, and they were big at Bass Lake, where I spent my summer vacations, 2 or 3 4 summers in a row.
In 6th and 7th grade, the Beatles were it. And part of 8th grade too, but I think it was 8th grade and 9th grade the Beach Boys took over.
For you?
For me.
Oh, yeah. And what happened there?
Well, being a Southern California girl, how could you not love the Beach Boys? Probably part of it was we wanted to be a little different too than everybody else. You know, everyone else was so. I mean, I still love the Beatles, but then the Beach Boys sort of took priority over them, with my girlfriend Linda, who I was starting to tell you about, and you know, California Girls and those kind of songs, and we loved the beach, and Surfer Girl was one of my favorite songs.
But the music was just the pop music at the time, whatever was popular. And there was, in my opinion, the 60s has never been matched for as many hit records that they came out of, artistically and innovativeness. They had, I've gone through 5, 6 decades since then, 5 decades. So I can attest that the music of the 60s, they've never had anything comparable to it. So many good songs at one time. It was a fun time to be growing up in, if you like music.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think Debbie Bennett left like after 7th grade. They moved to Missouri, but she didn't go to my same school in junior high. In fact, I remember that first day of walking to school in junior high, and I didn't have any like close friend because she had moved to the other side of town, and you know, I knew people because I'd gone to school with them, but you know, you always have that best girlfriend, and I didn't have that. It was really kind of scary that first day, because going to junior high, you know, and then not really having that support of a best friend. So in 8th grade, I met Linda Smale, spelled S-M-A-L-E. I met Linda Smale in 8th grade, and we always laughed about it afterwards because, you know, they made us take PE. PE is different than when you went to school. When we had PE, we had to take showers afterwards. And of course that was traumatic in 7th grade. We knew we had to do that, but it was scary, like dressing in front of all the other girls and taking a shower, and you had to prove you'd been in the shower, because some girls just, you know, stick their foot in or something and wrap the towel around, and you know, they wanted us to shower. But so you're doing your PE class, and you only have so much time to shower and get dressed and get to your next class, so you're rushing, and you know, it was very traumatic for a young lady. And we were leaving PE, and Linda was in my class, but I didn't know her yet. And we were sort of walking, not together, but the same pace. And she looks over at me and she says, "Do I have all my clothes on?" Because that's the way you felt. You felt like you had thrown your stuff on so fast that you weren't sure if you had it all on. And I started laughing, and I said, "Yeah, you look okay to me." And just sort of struck up the friendship. And then we found out she just lived around the corner from me, because like we walked home from school, and we became fast friends all through high school too. So
Wally Loster was he came into my mind because he lived across the street from Greg LaRue. After I moved from the one side of town to the other side of town, Greg's parents moved also, coincidentally, not more than a couple blocks off of Scott. Steve Patterson lived behind me off of Scott, and then Greg LaRue lived the next block over, and Wally Loster lived across the street from Greg. And you're asking who the friends were. I don't know if we got to high school friends, but
we did, but we didn't get to Wally Loster.
Yeah, he was perhaps one of my closest friends in high school. Maybe even more so than Jimmy, because Jimmy, outside of football, he didn't do much but act as my wingman. Wally was football and track, and very intelligent. One of these guys that got straight A's in everything he did, high school, college, law school. I think he got his first B his second year of law school on a grade. That's how smart he was. He was also the exchange student with the French students, so he went away his senior year to France for the year, and we had whoever come over and be the exchange students. But I got to know Wally well and his family well too.
Her and I we love the Beatles, but we love the Beach Boys just a little bit more. And we love the idea they sang about, California stuff, I think. And we were beach bums ourselves, so.
And the relationship continued through college, and after college he ended up settling in Santa Barbara. And I remember in my law practice he contacted me and had a client that he wanted me to take care of his affairs, legal affairs in Phoenix. Happened to be in Phoenix in Arizona, so we kept up contact even then. Last time I had contact with Wally was maybe over 10 years ago, but he was running marathons at that time. He was an all-state wrestler. He was really tiny but wiry and tough, very fast on the track team, 100 meters runner, and receiver, halfback on our football team. Was very small. Wally Loster.
The friend I was telling you about, Linda, and I spent many summer days on the beach. I mean, the whole day at the beach. Her dad worked at McDonnell Douglas, which was, I believe, in Long Beach. And he would take us to the beach in the morning and drop us off. And he worked in McDonnell Douglas, which was a hard hat occupation, like they say. And so he started early in the morning. And then my dad would pick us up after work like at 5 o'clock. I'm surprised at 62 I don't have skin cancer, but maybe I should knock on wood. But so far I've been fortunate that way.
Grunion hunting was something that was popular up in the Central Coast, California, and I'm sure they still are, but I don't think they're as much anymore. There were fish that came out of the ocean and would, on their tails, run up onto the beach and lay their eggs at low tide. And then at high tide, when the eggs hatched, they would be swept out into the ocean. And that's sort of, I guess, like the salmon up in the northwest United States, how they'd swim upstream to lay their eggs. Or grunions would walk on the sand to lay their eggs and bury them. And when they were there, they were pretty tasty. They were anywhere from 8 or 9 inches long to maybe a foot long, 14 inches. And they were good to catch and cook. And we'd go grunion hunting, which would mean when the grunion were running, and the newspaper would let you know when that was, because they'd tell you when low tide was, and that's when they came out of the water. High tide, I'm sorry. They came out of the water high tide, so they get their eggs buried up high. We'd go grunion hunting at Avila or Pismo or wherever beach we went to. A lot of fun times doing that. And of course, you'd always have not barbecue, but a fire going on the beach.
And I remember the first time I went to the beach without my parents. That was in 8th grade too. That felt so grown up, to just be there with my friends. So.
Did you ever? When did you learn to surf, and when did you?
Not just body surf, but that was fun, and that's what we did too. We always made fun of the girls who just went to the beach and never went in the water and just laid in the. We never did that. We had a little routine. We went to the beach early, like I said, and the surfers were all surfing then, and anybody who surfed we were in love with. So we'd sit on the beach and watch the surfers, and then the sun would come out, because California it's all overcast in the morning. And then when it warmed up, we'd go body surfing. We'd go in and either jump through the waves or ride them into shore. and then we'd always take a hike up to the snack bar and get strips and hot sauce. In fact, to this day, people on Facebook, because I belong to this, I like a page that is called Westminster Residents Past and Present, and people on there talk all about remember this and remember that, and because Westminster was a small town back then, so a lot of stuff I've remembered because someone's reminded me of it. On that Facebook page, people will write, "Oh, does anybody remember the Pup and Taco at such and such?" "Oh yeah, I remember that." So just recently someone said, "Oh yeah, the snack bars at Huntington Beach had the best strips and hot sauce," and then everybody started commenting on it. And they were something special. It was chips, but they were cut like long, long like rectangles, and the hot sauce that I've never tasted before or since. I could live on that, and we'd always get that.
I went lobster hunting once with Dave, and you were on a buddy system. Did I tell you this story?
Oh yeah, you did. But go ahead.
Yeah, where you'd have to go in some narrow. You always had a buddy scuba dive in case something happened to you. But with the lobsters, they were always tucked away in these narrow shells under the water.
I always think of the scene in Jaws too when you tell me this story.
And we were maybe 100 feet down, and it was just enough so that one person could go in. And so I went in, and he held onto my legs, and you'd get the lobsters, and he'd kick and he'd pull you out type thing. It was my turn to go in the cave, and I'd go in, and I saw all these lobsters on the walls in front of me, maybe arm's length and a foot or two past that. But I was so enthralled looking at the lobsters, I didn't look left or right, because the cave was wide this way once you got into the narrow passageway. And to my right, I finally noticed was a big grouper fish. A big grouper fish would get maybe a couple 100 pounds and maybe 4 to 5 feet in length. A big old fish, and it was like this far away from me, looking like this. And then I looked to my left, and right there was a big hammerhead shark. I remember seeing the hammerhead took almost the whole space of the cave, the head of it, and I started kicking my feet so quickly and they pulled me up. I barely catch my breath until I got to the surface of it. More interesting experiences getting scuba diving.
And then we go back. We'd walk, as far as we could down the beach, and then walk back. We always went with minimal stuff because, we left our towels so often. We had little places where we hid like when we went in the water, you had to hide your stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't remember what we did, but I remember we had little ways of I had to have a watch, no cell phones in those days.
Right.
And we had to have some money, so I don't remember where we used to hide it, but...
And you're just a young teenager and would spend all day just the two of you on the beach, no one else around.
Yeah. Well, there was other people, but no
other
one we
people.
knew.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah. I mean, we didn't do that every day, but we did it quite often. And then, of course, there was no sunscreen in those days. We used to put cocoa butter on. That's why I'm saying, knock on wood, yeah. I'd never developed skin cancer, or I haven't yet.
Isn't that, I think that increases your risk maybe, or?
Yeah, it's like frying your skin, you're putting cocoa butter on. We get pretty dark in the summer, but, there was also good things. We got a lot of exercise because we body surfed and we walked. We didn't just lay there in the sun. So we did, but not all day, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. I don't know, I guess sports took up so much time in my life, and of course studying in high school, that I don't know, I can't think of any other activities. Maybe if I was given examples, I could tell you whether I did them or not, but school was first, and it took up, of course, all the time during the day and sometimes homework, and sports was second, and the Brownells were third in high school. And
didn't have friends that you went off driving somewhere with, or?
Even though I had a lot of friends I didn't have super close friends other than Jimmy that I would actually go do things with. Like the story I told you about us going out to Point Sal and climbing that cliff and almost killing ourselves. Other than that, my time was spent with the Brownells. The activities were centered around them.
Gotcha. You had another friend along with Linda. I remember you telling me about, and a funny story the three of you would say about your names.
Oh yeah, I didn't have that. Was in junior high. That was in.
Oh, we're in that time era.
That was in 8th grade, and her name was Marla Graber. Her name was Marla Graber, and she, looking back, she was a lot more streetwise than Linda and I were. She had a boy, an older boyfriend and stuff, and I think she
more than just going steady.
I think she was sexually permissive even in 8th grade. Looking back, but her name was Linda Graber.
Linda Graber?
Maybe I shouldn't say this.
No, you can say. But no, her name was, you just said, I thought you just said her name was
Marla.
Marla
Graber, Linda Small, and Louise Kent. So we used to say our last names really fast. We used to say Graber, Cunt, and Smell.
I can remember another aspect of me that started early with nicknames. I'd always come up with nicknames for my friends or relatives. Huey was an example of that one, and I continued throughout my life picking up nicknames, and for some reason I'm sticking to people. Mom can probably tell you better details if she was in here helping on some of the examples of nicknames. Anyway, I don't know why I had to throw that in, but I'm throwing it in.
And going back to Linda and Marla.
Yes.
We had originally started on them.
Right.
So what are some of the antics aside from introducing yourself in a vulgar way that you get into with them? And walking.
Well, Linda was always my best friend, but we were sort of more intrigued with Marla because she was so much more worldly, if you want to use that.
Same age?
She was the same age as, but she had a boyfriend who was like 17.
Right.
And looking back, then you're so naive and you don't think about things. But her sister, she had an older sister. She lived with her mom, who was divorced, in an apartment. But her sister lived closer to the junior high and was married. And we went to see her one time, and they were kind of talking, and she said something about she was relieved because she had started her period. I don't mean started it for the first time. Mm-hmm. But when I was that age, I didn't think about what that meant. It wasn't until I was older.
They weren't sleeping in the same bed.
Yeah. When I look back later, I said, wow, she was sexually promiscuous. She was worried she was pregnant, so she was happy that she started her period. I realized, but then at that age, I didn't even,
While you were quite busy with sports, you had quite a number of different jobs you held when you were younger. At least you have listed here. Some of them I know about, some I didn't. I knew you were a busboy at one point in time. Is that at your uncle's restaurant?
Yes, that was perhaps my first big job. The strawberry picking was before that, but I started as a busboy, I think, when I was 12 or 13 years old at my uncle's restaurant. And obviously I had the job because of my relationship with my uncle, and I wasn't good at it. I got bored easily. One of my jobs was to clean the wax out of the candles on all the table. And I wouldn't throw the wax away. I would keep it over in the corner where the coffee and water was kept, where I was responsible for filling people's glasses of water up and cleaning their tables and everything. And I would stand there in the corner until it became necessary for me to wait on somebody and carve things out of the wax. I would shape them, not carve them. Sculpt them, I guess is the word I'm looking for. And I remember having, for the longest time, taking them home and painting them, and one was a knife, and one was a bell, and one was a gun. those are the things I carved standing in the corner at my uncle's restaurant, and it was nice. I always was given a meal when I left. I worked maybe 3-4 nights a week. My family, especially my sisters, would always want me to bring a steak home because the food was so fabulous, and
But you
I didn't
preferred-
like steaks. They got caught in my teeth. I had terrible teeth as a kid. I had more cavities, I think, than 10 kids combined. It seemed like I was always going to the dentist. But in any case, I always would prefer ground chuck or ground round steak rather than regular steak. It would always irritate my sisters. Can't believe you have your choice of the top steaks there and you're bringing home ground round, I'd always hear. But
Dog meat, someone said.
dog meat is that
Dog food.
dog food. I wouldn't be surprised.
And 8th grade was the year too that we started calling boys that we didn't know and talking to them on the phone.
Explain that. What do you mean calling?
I don't
Like
remember.
looking in the yellow pages?
No, you
or-
know, I don't know how it started. I think it was our one friend. What was her name? Mary Benedetto. Something like that.
Benedetto.
Yeah. And I think she was Filipino. And she had somehow talked to these guys on the phone. And so they were older, they were in high school. I still know their names. Steve Martin, not the Steve Martin. Steve Martin and Dave McDonald. Well, so then we started talking to him. And we talked for a long time, and I had a mad crush on Dave McDonald, although I'd never seen him or met him or anything. They were surfers. That was why the big attraction. That's when the shift started from the Beatles to the Beach Boys. And we found out where they lived. We told them we were freshmen at Marina High School, which was another high school nearby. I went to Westminster High School eventually, but we were in 8th grade still, and we said that we were freshmen at Marina because they were sophomores at Westminster, so that was okay. I don't know why 1 year made so much difference. I guess because in one scenario we were in high school already, and the other one we were still junior high. So I was like, they're not going to hang with junior high girls. So I started talking to Dave McDonald a lot, and I had a mad crush on him and never even seen him. So we found out where they lived, and we cruised by their house. How did we cruise by their houses? Oh, I know. I'm trying to think. We're in junior high. But Linda Small had an older sister. I mean, she was 5 years older. She still lived at home, but she was like 19, and she was a hairdresser. And she used to take us places sometimes, like to the drive-in or drive by the beach at night or whatever. She was very protective of us or stuff. So she'd drive us by these guys' houses. And something happened, and they came. They found out we were out there or something, and they came running out to the car, and we were all screaming and stuff, and stuff, and then we were talking. And this is when I realized that I had a deeper voice than most girls. Oh yeah, my voice is deep. They knew who I was right away because of my voice. They go, "Oh, I know you're Louise because I can tell from your voice,
My voice is deep, yeah.
Yeah. Oh yeah, my voice is deep. So I was like, whoa, I didn't even realize I had a deep voice. Oh yeah, my voice is deep. But anyway, I did spend one lovely afternoon in the latter part of my 8th grade year with Dave McDonald, actually holding his hand. He gave me one afternoon. But
He gave you his hand.
yeah, we met up at Marla's mother's apartment because she was at work, and he was very sweet, and but I was a little 8th grader, so he wasn't going to be interested, but he was sweet to me that one afternoon. But I was, even in high school, when then we were freshmen and they were juniors, and they knew who we were and stuff, we were sort of, but my girlfriend Linda had a crush on Steve Martin, and actually Steve Martin was a very good looking guy. Dave was not, but I liked his personality. But even after I had my own boyfriend and stuff, and Dave McDonald got a girlfriend, which he ended up marrying her. I was jealous.
You were a lifeguard. I didn't know that.
Lifeguard. I worked at the Plunge, the Santa Maria pool, and at the country club. Also had a swimming pool, and this was part-time during the summer.
Yeah. Did you save anyone's life?
No,
No. Just sat and got tanned.
basically.
An ice cream scooper, was that at the, where was that at?
That was at a drugstore, thrift drugstore in North Santa Maria, and that was a summer job, part-time, and that was a great job for me athletically because it was so friggin' hard, and it really built up your forearms and your hands and your fingers, scooping in that hard ice cream all day. But yeah, I can remember doing that too.
And did you move on to be a pharmacy assistant then at that same drugstore, or was that a different drugstore?
No, that was at Parsons. That was a different drugstore. Parsons brothers. There were two brothers, one of whom lived across the street from us when we moved across town to Scott Drive. I ended up living at 507 North Scott from, I think, maybe my freshman year in high school on. And at that time, we got to know him because they're neighbors, and he had a drugstore with his brother, and it was a fairly large retail store. They sold more than just prescriptions and drugs. They sold everything from cosmetics to sundries to toilet paper, that kind of stuff. It was a fairly large size store. And I started there maybe my freshman year in high school, just helping at the store and eventually gravitating to the pharmacy. And I don't think they had techs at that time. I know we had a cashier and a woman who helped pulling the drugs off the shelf for the pharmacist, but it was always the pharmacist who actually filled the pills, except I started doing that, and you had to type your labels on a manual typewriter. You'd slip the label into the typewriter and type the directions, the doctor's names, the date. So
everything required by law.
Yeah.
Or were there laws, pharmacy related?
I'm sure there were, but I didn't have a clue. I was just working there, and they were putting more and more responsibilities on me. I got to know the store well. This is during the 4 years that I worked there in high school. And in addition to the filling prescriptions and typing labels, I started doing orders for the store. And they also found I could write ads real well that would appear in the paper showing what specials they had on. And I started helping the guy do the ads, and eventually took over his job, so I was doing the classified ads, not classified, but the advertisement page for the store. And I moved up to like assistant manager my senior year in high school because I was doing so much of the store work and the pharmacy work.
So yeah, all these silly things. Oh, and another thing. One time my dad was driving us to the beach, and Dave McDonald was hitchhiking to the beach. I don't know if we had met him then or not. They knew who we were, and I said, "Oh, there's Dave McDonald hitchhiking." And my dad thought I wanted him to pull over. And he started pulling over, and I screamed, and I hit the floor and put my beach towel over me, and my dad was like, "What?" And I said, no, you can't stop. Ah. Yeah, we used to drive by their house a lot. I'd even get my mom to drive by their house. She'd do it.
Kind of stalkerish.
Yeah, very stalkerish. That's very common with girls at that age, though.
And then you'd like call him on the phone, and he wouldn't know who you were?
No, they got to know us.
I got you.
They got to know us over the phone. They just didn't know who we were. They thought we were, freshmen at Marina High School, but we weren't. But at that age, 1 year makes a big difference. So we ended up going to high school together for a couple years anyway. But I always still kind of had a little crush on him all through high school until he graduated. That was interesting.
I got to be close friends with the Parson brothers. They're both very nice guys. Mark was the younger one, and can't remember the old one's name now. Their father was on the State Board of Pharmacy for California. He was a big shot in pharmacy. And that's probably why I gravitated as my secondary education as a pharmacy major. But I thought about that, and I don't think I was a tech. I don't think they licensed techs. I think you had pharmacists and people who helped out in the pharmacy. So that's why I put down pharmacy assistant. I'm not sure what I was.
Yeah. Any episodes like in It's a Wonderful Life where you caught the pharmacist making a mistake and saved someone's life that way, or anything like that?
No, nothing. I can remember I liked the personality of the Parson brothers. They were hang loose, and they would talk a little baldry language, and they had a floater pharmacist who came in and helped them occasionally. It was just like them, and he was cool, and I sort of got the image of the pharmacists being cool guys who could say what they wanted back behind the counter and cause
about all
jitters.
the people,
They weren't-
patients.
Pardon me?
About all the patients.
Yeah, not so much sarcasm along the Michael Smith way, but just that here were professional people that I thought would be real uptight and straight and narrow, and they were just really hang loose type people, and that impressed upon me. It became my my junior year, the CEO, I guess they called it. I'm not sure what it was called, but it was where you dedicated a class to working in a place outside of school and learning about that profession. So since I had
Trade
worked for them
school?
for a couple of years, no, it was just a class. I think they called him CEO when I hired
okay.
Kim as a secretary. Didn't hire her, but she worked in my law office for 1 day a week, something like that.
And were they still doing a lot of the, compounding and
Yes.
pestle and mortar?
Yeah, a lot of compounding then.
Yeah.
And I learned to do that too, as well. I would say that by the time I left as a senior out of high school, I was doing the work of a pharmacist. I could do everything a pharmacist could do, at least at that time.
Mm-hmm.
When you asked me my friends, there was also Connie Zephyr John, which
Zephyr John.
Zephyr John, which
You have on here.
she was interesting gal, and she was sort of like Linda was my best friend, but then we had these other two friends, which were Connie and the other girl's name, I just can't remember her first name. Her last name was Wilson. Connie had really nice parents, and she used to tell us these stories about when her mom was growing up, how she lived in a house that had ghosts. And that was kind of interesting. But
And she heard voices too.
no, the mother told us the stories too. How things would move and all this kind of stuff. You didn't know whether to believe it or not. But nice, kind of normal girl. But I'll have to look up her name. Wilson. What was her first name? I want to say Debbie Wilson, but it wasn't Debbie Wilson. But looking back, she had a very sad existence. She was, first of all, she was a foster child. She lived with a husband and wife, and she lived with her two biological sisters as well. A sister who was older and a sister that was younger. But I think she was both physically and sexually abused. I think her foster father sexually abused her. Looking back now, I never knew any of that kind of stuff went on. Her mom, her foster mom, I don't know if they were fosters. Yeah, they were foster. She was a real piece, looking back. When you're that age, you don't know the world. She had a daycare in her home that she ran illegally. She was licensed, but she was only supposed to have so many children. Because one day when I was there, the oldest daughter, who was older than my friend, she said, "Oh, the inspector, somebody's coming. You have to take some of these kids." So she was old enough to drive, so she took whatever kids were over the limit in the car and took them for ice cream or something. So when the inspector came, she only had, now I look back, just think if that was your child and some 16-year-old is driving them around. And then the other thing I remember is I guess I didn't think about it back then, but her mother was always in bed. The girls are the ones who ran the daycare.
Mm-hmm.
She was always in there, and I thought, the few times I saw her in there, I thought she was sick or something, but she was just in there eating chocolates, reading magazines, while her foster girls did all the work.
And you were also a caddy. I'm guessing that was for your father?
No, it wasn't. I put that down because there's a interesting story that I detail in my autobiography, but again, I'll relate it to you.
Soon to be sold in bookstores and Amazon.com.
I worked as a caddy for a summer at the Santa Maria Country Club that my dad belonged to. There was only one golf course, actually. I think there was two. One 9-hole course, public course on the other side of town, but this one was a little outside of town, a private course, beautiful private course. Have you ever seen it?
Yeah, I'm sure you took me there.
It was perhaps, of all the golf courses I played in the United States and Arizona and California particularly, one of the prettiest. It was kept up well. It was just beautiful with big trees. Not the main pros, but for the satellite tours of the pros that weren't quite good enough to be on the main pro tour.
PGA.
And in fact, they would one day be good enough perhaps, but you had to qualify on the satellite tour.
Mm-hmm.
And so the Santa Maria Open was, in essence, the California Open. They'd hold it in Santa Maria, and they'd have the satellite pros all come into town to play, and they'd have celebrities too. A name Lawrence Welk. I'm not sure if anyone will ever remember who he was, but Mom can tell you a lot because her family was really into Lawrence Welk. But he was a band conductor who had a TV show that was quite popular in the 50s and 60s. And he would come up to play in the Santa Maria Open all the time. He was a big celebrity that came up. So my boyfriend and I think it was Jimmy Ordell, had the crazy idea
And when he says boyfriend, he means friend. Unless he wants to reveal something.
No. He and I went up, and I think I was maybe 12, to try to caddy. I was a strong kid at the age and big kid, so I could carry a bag no problem. 18 holes, which is what you had to do on the satellite professional tour. And in fact, even today, they don't allow carts, electrical carts. So we got out there and watched the professional caddies come in and how they operated, and there would be a group of professional caddies that would actually follow the satellite tours and caddy for these pros. I remember Lawrence Welk pulling up in his car, big old Cadillac, and golf clubs in the back of the trunk. He lifted it up, and we'd scurry over there to try to carry his clubs, but the professional caddies, who were adult men, would literally push us away and not even allow us to get close. And they would take all the choice jobs that first day.
Maybe her name was Debbie. Debbie Wilson? No. But anyway, she was always... I don't think the other two girls were affected by what went on in that house, whatever went on, because her younger sister seemed happy and normal, and her older sister was quite good looking, and she was not. She was a little overweight, and she wore glasses, and she was sort of klutzy, and she ended up probably maybe our sophomore or junior year getting into drugs, which we didn't do at all. And she'd end up going in the bathroom during the day and doing drugs, and she got kicked out of school I don't know how many times.
What kind of drugs?
Pills, uppers, downers, and
LSD?
She wouldn't just do them in the bathroom. She'd spend the day in the bathroom. She'd do drugs and spend the day in instead of going to class. And then, where is she? And they go look for her and find her in the bathroom. So, it was always this, we got to suspend you, and she'd get suspended, and then they'd end up kicking her out. And she, for a while, had a boyfriend who was pretty normal, and she seemed like she was getting her stuff together, but then he ended up breaking up with her because she went back to the drugs. In fact, she didn't graduate from our high school. She ended up, because she was kicked out so much, they finally kicked her out for good, and she had to go to what they called in those days continuation school, where you went, the troublemakers or the people who were having problems or whatever went to this school, and that's where she ended up going to school. And then she ended up getting pregnant by one of her fellow students, because I'm the first person she told. She came to my house one night and she said, "Can we go talk?" And we went back in my bedroom, and she told me she was pregnant, and I didn't know what to tell her, and
How old were you?
I was probably a senior by then, maybe. And she ended up marrying the guy, because that's what you did in those days. And he was abusive to her. Terribly abusive. I went to visit them once to bring their baby a gift. They were living in an apartment, and she was scared to death of him, I could tell. It was very uncomfortable being in that apartment. And, looking back now, I feel so bad. And I think what happened was she ended up leaving him, and his parents are the ones who raised that child. And I only know that because they lived near the school that my mom was the elementary school secretary, and they told my mom the whole story. I don't know if she got back into drugs or what. I don't know what happened to her. I lost contact with her after that.
But I remember sometime late morning, a guy got out of the car, and I made it up to his car before anyone else did, and asked him if he wanted me to caddy for him. And he looked at me as you would look at a young kid and say, "Can you even carry a bag?" And I said, "Yeah, I've been playing golf since I was literally 5 years old, and I can carry 2 bags if I have to." So I'd like to think what I presented to him won him over, but I think the real reason he hired me that day was because he wasn't very wealthy, and he saw a chance to have a kid for dimes compared to what they had to pay the caddies caddy for him. And maybe he didn't think he was going to do that well anyway. I don't know. His name was White, Donald White. And I caddied for him that day, and interestingly, on the very first hole on the Santa Maria Country Club, the professional caddy for the partner that he was playing with was tending the flag, and I was given strict orders not to get in the way of the golfers and to stay off the greens when we got to the greens. And I tried to explain to this Donald White that my dad had instructed me on golf matters since I was 5 years old, so I knew exactly what to do and where not to stand and how to pull the flag out and everything. But I just was so thrilled just to be able to caddy, thinking I was going to make big bucks, that I stood to the side. And I can recall that caddy holding that flag in a long putt off the green from his golfer that he was caddying for, and the ball was going right for the hole, and right at the last second he got all excited and said, "You're going to make it, you're going to make it," and he pulled the pin out and knocked the ball away from the hole, and the guy fired him on the spot. I can remember that so vividly. And the guy immediately looked at me and said, "Well, I guess you're going to have to carry the bag if you don't mind," which I never got paid for from that guy, but I ended up carrying his bag and my golfer's bag for the 18 holes as a 12-year-old kid. And for all that work, and even after the round was finished, my guy, Donald White, wanted to go hit some practice balls. I had to carry his bag out to the driving range, wait around an hour and a half there while he hit balls, and after all that, I think I got $5. Caddies were getting anywhere from $50 to $200, and I got $5. And I remember that, but I was so excited and jazzed that I thought I was still doing great. Amazingly, he shot like in the low 60s and was tied for the lead after that first day. So the second day, I come there and I'm waiting for him, and I know it's tea time, and he had told me, "You want to caddy for me tomorrow?" Maybe he thought I was his good luck charm, and I said, "Sure, I'd love to." And so I was there waiting for him. We went and hit balls ahead of time. We had a later tea time that time because he was in the lead, and he shot another good round. It was only a 3-day tournament, but he was tied for the lead going into the last day. And I went there the next day and to caddy for him. I just assumed I would caddy for him, and when he got out of his car, I was waiting for him all day, and he told me he wasn't going to use me. He says, "I've hired a professional caddy for the final day." And I was so heartbroken. I was literally close to tears, and I went home. I remember crying at home, telling him what had happened to him. And he went out that day and blew up. He shot like a 78 or 79 and completely lost.
Mm.
I was so
It was good luck charm
glad.
too. Yeah.
I was so glad he did poorly, but I remember that only because he fired me after 2 hard days of working for that turkey and getting peanuts and for my work. That's my recollection of caddying. That was my only event, only time I did caddy.
In fact, I don't know where any of them are. Linda, after graduation, her parents, Linda's parents were from San Diego. They never sold their house in San Diego. They rented it out, and they first moved to Palmdale because he went wherever the work was. They lived in Palmdale for a while because Linda used to always talk about how she hated Palmdale, how the wind blew all the time. It was always windy.
Mm-hmm.
And then they moved to the house around the corner from us, and they lived there till after Linda's junior year, and they were going to move back to San Diego. And Linda wanted to finish high school at Westminster High. So by this time her sister had an apartment, and so she moved in with her sister to finish her senior year of high school. So then after we all graduated, her and her sister moved to San Diego as well. I did see her. I went to her sister's wedding. I went down to San Diego to her sister's wedding. I saw her a couple more times after that, but and then the last I heard from her, it was after we lived here in Arizona. Grandma called me and said that, your grandma called me and said that she had heard from Linda Smell. That Linda called her because, I don't know if my mom understood what the phone call was about, but because my mom was too busy telling her all about me, and she said, yeah, she called because she said she had like a sore on her arm, and it turned out to be cancer. And I don't know if she died from that or not, because Linda was the type who probably wouldn't have gone to a doctor right away, and she became a hairdresser herself.
You wrote down rec leader. What was that?
That was my last year of high school, my first year of college, I think, where I came back, and my cousin George and I started off in the Santa Maria Recreational Department, where we would be in charge of, at different schools, maybe 4 different locations in Santa Maria, doing summer recreational programs for the kids, anything from organizing little sports indoors or outdoors. Our second year, when we got involved in the program, they made us the head of the program. And we ran the whole Santa Maria, George and I, and we started the Santa Maria Summer Olympics for the kids. That was our big thing, developing that Olympics, which we held at the high school stadium, and it was a real fun time, a lot of fun. Rec leader, I'm not sure what I would be called, but
I think she was calling me because we had spent so much time in the sun together, and I think she was sort of wanted to warn me, check your body or blah blah blah. It's too late for me, but it's not too late for you. And I wrote her a letter after that, but I never heard from her again. And she had never gotten married, but she had 2 boys. And she was, when she went down to San Diego, she really got into the sailors down there, lonely men. And that's who her boyfriend was at the time. He was a sailor and stuff, and he didn't marry her, but they had 2 kids together, and they never did get married. I don't know what happened to him either. But she was a sweet girl.
Yeah. And Marla?
I don't know. After
high school?
Not even high school. After 8th grade. I only knew her for that 1 year. I don't know. I don't remember if they moved away, but she didn't go to my high school. So.
Summer camp counselor. Where were you a camp counselor?
My second or third year in high school, I went to a music camp because of my girlfriend at the time, whose mom was the nurse for the camp, and we were counselors for the younger campers, music counselors, up behind San Ynez in Solvang area. the music camp was, and it was about a 2 or 3 week camp. It was a lot of fun. Played adult counselor, which was something else for a young punk high school kid.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so when I was a freshman in high school, I fell in love with, or whatever the word you want to use,
Had a crush.
had a crush on Bill Priest, which coincidentally I've just become, maybe 2 months ago, became friends with on Facebook.
Now, we touched on this subject, the first main love of your life at that time. Terry Lee.
Terry Lee.
The woman and the family who made you the man you are today.
Well, in large part they did certainly contribute. They were my family away from my family.
And he was a senior.
Mm-hmm.
And we used to I kind of had a crush on him when we used to tease each other and everything. And then he asked me to the Christmas dance. So I was like, oh, okay, yeah, sure, I'll go. And so we were going to go to the Christmas dance, and then he was a Baptist. And he came to me and he said, well, we can do one or two things. He said, the same night, my church is also having a dance.
Mm-hmm.
And it was like on a boat out in the harbor at Christmas time. So I said, we're going to your church one.
My family, the Libbon family, I wasn't close really at all.
Although your dad started becoming more involved with you once you become a sports star.
Once I got to high school, we started going to the games. Up to that time, as I mentioned earlier, they had extensive sports leagues in all 3 or 4 sports, and he would never go. I can all remember my mom coming to my flag football games and my biddy basketball games after work, getting there to watch some of them, but never my dad. But when I got to high school, he started coming around, and he transitioned, I don't know why, but he transitioned into a pretty good father later in my life at college level and after that. He was just growing up, and I don't think it was his fault as much as it was perhaps his environment that he grew up in and his culture that he grew up in, that he just didn't know about parenting,
Mm-hmm.
how to be a parent.
The Brownells, you found a role model.
Brownells came into my life, and they became my family, and yes, they became a role model family. They were a role model family.
So we ended up going to that, and then I was only 15, and I wasn't supposed to date till I was 16, but my mom let me go to that because it was,
Baptist.
and it was very well supervised and whatnot. And so then we started a little romance, and he was my boyfriend, and so he was a senior, so I went to the prom. And then sometime my sophomore year, he and I broke up. I broke up with him.
Mm-hmm.
It was one of those, well, I think I should date other people, blah, blah, blah. It wasn't like a big fight and we broke up. It was just like, I was getting a lot of pressure from my mother too. She didn't want me to be dating just one guy when I was so young and blah, blah, blah.
How did you meet Terry Lee?
I met her at a summer dance held at the country club, my dad's golf course.
How old were you?
I was between my freshman and sophomore year. So I was 14 and a half, I guess, just turned 15 that July. She was a year younger than me. She was an outstanding athlete too, and golfer, of course, and they hold maybe 1 or 2 dances during the summer, the country club for youths, and the big barbecue, and then the dance afterwards, and that's where we met. I went with Jimmy Ordell, dragged him along because I wanted companionship.
A wingman.
A wingman, exactly. And it wasn't like we danced the whole night away. It was like halfway through the dance that I finally had enough nerve to go up and ask her. She was very my kind of girl, very trim, fit, good tan. You could tell she was an athlete. Very, very pretty. And we sort of hit it off. We danced that dance.
We had changed churches, and at our new church was a guy named John Kilpatrick.
Yes, this is what we're getting at, and I'll probably segue in somewhat with my father and John the Rabbit.
Oh, yeah. And so, when I remember when I went to the church, and they had one reason why my parents wanted to transfer to that church was it was bigger. Our other church, they had been charter members, original members, and they had started, and we didn't even have a church back then. It was held in the American Legion Hall, and then they built a church and blah, blah, blah. But it was so small that there was no really youth program.
Mm-hmm.
There was maybe 5 of us. It wasn't anything really great. And I'd been hearing about Our Redeemer and how great their youth program was, and there were so many kids and blah blah, and all the fun things they did. And so I sort of pressured my parents too, that I wanted to, they waited till after I went through confirmation and I was confirmed at our old church. But as soon as that went by the wayside, we changed churches.
Mm-hmm.
Went out to see her. I had to be driven by my mom to go out to her house and dropped off. Spent time with her there. Got to know her family. She was the oldest of the family. She had a younger brother, Scott, and then a younger sister, Nancy, and even a younger brother, Lee, who I ended up being like a mentor to when I got to know him when I was 15, 16. Lee was like a little leaguer, maybe 7 or 8. And I helped him in sports, and I grew closer to the family to the point where I so enjoyed being around them that every chance I got, I was out at the Brownell house. Not necessarily doing things with Terry Lee, but doing things with the family. And many things that we did during the time. Her dad was a shop teacher at Rigetti and a carpenter by trade. He built an extension to the house, which Jimmy and I, who I dragged along with my wingman out to the Brownells, he started having some kind of a affection towards Nancy, Terry Lee's younger sister. Jimmy 15, 16 at the time, and Nancy was maybe 10, 11. So it was a little bizarre, but not for Jimmy. Nothing ever came of it other than Jimmy was obsessed with Nancy. But he came out with me a lot, and after I got my driver's license, came out there even more. But initially I remember my mom having to take me out and drop me off, which was sort of lame, but I had so much fun and finally had a family that I really respected and enjoyed.
And so that first Sunday they said, come on out to our youth thing, we're going to play volleyball and go have pizza. They always did fun things. They always had a little bit of religion thrown in, but it was mostly fun stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So I go to the...
Jesus said, eat of this pizza is my small intestine.
There you go. So I went to the youth thing, and of course I didn't really know anybody and everything, and John was there, and he had a date there, but he was paying way more attention to me than his date.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't flirt with him because I wasn't that type. He had a girl there, so but he wasn't.
We did so much stuff, including exposing me to scuba diving and helping build a house. I learned carpentry. I learned how to take a car apart and put it back together. He taught us that too. He being Dave Brownell and Scott and Lee were with us learning. Went down to Mexico scuba diving with them. We'd scuba dive off Avila Beach up and down the coast from San Simeon to Catalina Islands during my high school life extensively. Once we flew to the Caribbean on a spur for the weekend. Remember diving off islands. I don't even know where I was, but I knew it was the Caribbean. They paid for the flight. We dove among sharks where you had to literally hold a stick out to keep the sharks away while you dove. I had getting into skin diving or scuba diving. It was a lot of interesting anecdotes that occurred there. Terry Lee, of course, would dive also, and she got stuck in seaweed once. Had to rescue her from there.
So then I think I went to call my dad to pick me up, and he said, I can take you home. And I said, okay, well, he took his girlfriend home first, which is a bad sign for the girlfriend, you know. And then he took me, I mean, nothing happened, but, you know, he took me home and everything. And, you know, you can tell when a guy is interested in you, and he seemed interested in me, but he was a year older than me and stuff. And I guess it took me a little bit longer to get interested in him.
I remember going down, you had to test to go down to 200 feet, and I became an instructor along with Pinky Beverness, who was a friend of the Brownells and a certified instructor. So he got me certified to teach scuba, and we were taking the class down to the 200-foot level so they could get their certification. And they had these stingrays, manta rays, that came over, 2 of them. They were just huge. They must have been a wingspan of maybe 15, 20 feet, and they just were going over you so slowly. I just enjoyed scuba diving. Unless you've experienced it, you don't know what it's like. It's so peaceful and calm. You don't hear anything down there. I guess it's similar like being out in space. I don't know, but I enjoyed scuba diving because of the Brownells. And I got to do scuba in the Caribbean. I got to do it off the islands, Catalina Island, a lot of neat places.
I know I went to prom with him my sophomore year because he was a junior. Yeah, he was a junior, but at the end of every year is when we had elections for the next year. And he had never been in, he was in cross country, he was in track, he was a good, you know, A student, and they always picked one male and one female from the class to go to girls and boys state. And they picked the most well-rounded student. And he thought he would get selected, and he didn't get selected. This football player got selected, and he was asking his counselor about it, and his counselor says, well, you were weak in one area. And he said, what was that? He said, student government. You've never been involved in student government. You do the sports, you do the academics, but no student government. So instead of running for like class treasurer or something, no, he's going to run for ASB president, student body president, because we had a treasurer, secretary, vice president, and president of each class, freshman, junior, and then there was what I guess you would call the executive branch, which was treasurer, secretary, vice president, and president of the whole student body.
Right.
So he decides, I'm going to run for student body president, not, you know, some little thing to get on my record.
It wasn't just exotic stuff they taught you, though, too. It was more practical stuff that's more abstract and more to help you out with daily life.
That was the type of man Dave was. He was a real conscientious, good parent that knew it was important to teach your children things that they could utilize in life, practical-wise. I learned the guitar from Dave. He's the one that started me playing the guitar. He loved to play the guitar. He wasn't great at it, but he knew chords, and he showed me how to hold the chords, or at least some of them, and got me interested in it. He was just a wonderful man. And his wife, Virginia, both of them were UC Santa Barbara graduates, UC University of California, Santa Barbara graduates. And she was a nurse, and she was a school nurse in high school and elementary nurse. She went around to the different schools. She was very educated, very nice woman, very funny woman.
But they also taught you behavior and etiquette, things like that as well, is that correct?
Perhaps. They were a pretty hangless family. I was finally maturing enough, although I still do stupid stuff sometimes, but I wasn't the bad kid anymore. I'd gotten past that age. I think maturity more than anything else changed me there.
But they had a particular technique that you took on yourself.
The Brownell technique? Oh yeah, the famous Brownell technique. Treatment, Brownell treatment. Where if a person had an annoying or bad habit, you would expose it by making fun of it and sort of semi-embarrassing the person to the point where he or she became conscious of it and would lose the habit, and that was the Brownell treatment, which we carried on into the Libbon family sometimes, much to the wrath of my son and my wife when I try to employ it sometimes. She's talking to Daniel. But yeah, they gave me a lot of things, a lot of neat things I got from the Brownells.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember telling my mom, because we weren't really kind of dating them, but we were still kind of flirting with each other. And I said, I don't think he'll win, because he's never, he hasn't paid his dues, so to speak. He hasn't been, usually like the junior class president would end up winning that, for the next year. So, the way they did that is you go to the gym and everyone's sitting in the bleachers and everyone gets up and makes a speech and you vote for who you want. And usually it's a popularity contest. You vote for your friend here or this person you like there. Because everybody says the same crap. They get up and say, "Hi, I'm Susie Lemons and I'm running for, sophomore class president. And please vote for me. I'll do a good job." Stuff like that. So he gets up there and he says, I can't remember exactly how the speech went, but it was something like, I think that we should have no lunch breaks, no more class dances, no more, all this kind of stuff. He got everyone's attention. Everyone's going, "What? What's this guy saying?" And then he didn't end it, but then he said, "That's what I would say if I was running for student body dictator. But I'm not. I'm running for student body president." And da-da-da-da-da-da. But he got everybody's attention. It was a different speech. He ended up winning. Mm-hmm. So I was like flabbergasted, so.
And you and Terry, what sort of things did you do together? I know you never really went all the way with her, but...
Well, one of the things, interesting thing that Terry used to always complain about was I wouldn't spend more time with her. I enjoyed her family so much. Nancy had a horse, 2 horses, and I'd go riding horseback with her. And Lee, I would mentor sports-wise. And Scott was a swimmer and water polo. And I remember she'd always complain, "Why don't we do things?" And the things we'd do, we'd drive to the beach. We went to the Avila or Pismo Beach together a lot. We'd drive out to Point Sal or different places to hike. We'd love to go to the drive-in theater, make out, those kind of things you did, just typical teenage things that we do together, in addition to going on trips with her family to Guaymas, Mexico, camping and diving. I did that a couple years with them. They always went during Christmas time. They weren't religious and they didn't celebrate Christmas, so they always chose that time to go to Guaymas, Mexico, down in the Gulf of Mexico, and camp out there for a couple weeks.
Finally, he asked me out on a date, so I go out on a date with him. Oh, he had a little conniver, he was. My mom didn't allow me to go to drive-in theaters. So we were going to go see a double feature with another couple. And at first they said they wanted to go to the drive-in, and I was like, I'm not allowed to go to the drive-in. Okay, so they go to the theater, and the 2 guys go up, and they come back with some lie. I was so naive in those days. I just thought everybody told the truth. And we were going to go see two movies. One of them, I'm trying to think of it. It was with Sidney Poitier. Call me Mr. Tibbs, he says in that movie. I can't think of the name of the movie now, but it was 2 good movies. And they go up to the thing, and they come back, and they go, they're not showing. These 2 shows are showing the same movie back to back. We won't be able to see both movies. And I'm like, you're kidding me. Well, they're showing them at the such and such drive-in, but you're not supposed to go. But I guess your mom won't know if we don't tell her. It was all a lie.
We used to go clamming at Pismo Beach, famous for clams, taking them out of the sand and having a big fire and burying them in the sand underneath the fire and cooking them. We used to hunt abalone, which are now extinct. When we scuba dive. That was a big thing going for abalone. I don't know if you know what an abalone is, but it's a shellfish
Yeah.
that would adhere to the wall. This is a rock, and this is the abalone, and there would suction on that wall, so it would be impossible to pull them off unless you did it a certain way. You always had to have a long, flat bar, maybe this long and this thick, that you'd come up to the abalone and flip them real quickly off the wall before they'd have a chance to adhere to it. And you'd put them in your sack that you'd carry around. And they created the most beautiful shells.
Mm-hmm.
They still, I'm sure, have abalone shells somewhere, but they are extinct now, at least in the California coast, because the commercial fishermen just fished them out to extinction.
Mm-hmm.
So that was another thing we did together, Terry Lee and I.
And to clarify things, I fact-checked both you and Mom. I had to fact-check her on a few things. Abalone are not extinct. They're threatened with extinction, like many organisms are, due to the acidification of the ocean. Actually, is the main thing causing their rate, although there are even abalone farms.
But are there any on the California coast? Because
that
was my understanding, that they were extinct on the California
Oh,
coast.
they're not present on it, but that is
not extinct as a species, right?
Gotcha.
I got you.
So we ended up going to the drive-in, but it was our first date.
Mm-hmm.
So, we're sitting in the front seat and the two in the back seat. I don't know what was going on, but there was a lot of rustling around, and you could tell they were making out, but I don't know what else was going on. I don't know if there was just some feeling under the shirt or they were just doing it. But every once in a while, John would peek in his rearview mirror. But anyway, so we had, we watched the movies and stuff, and we kissed a few times, but nothing like they were doing in the back seat.
Mm-hmm.
And he asked me out a few more times, and then
She was a special girlfriend. I've always said that I didn't have a lot of girlfriends in my life. In fact, I only had 3 major ones, and Terry Lee was my girlfriend in high school to the second year of college, and then Jody came in while I was at USC, and then Mom came in.
Mm-hmm.
But
she was
the first of 3 special women in my life, and I could have married any of the 3 of them and been happy.
the junior-senior prom was for the seniors, put on by the juniors. Mm-hmm. So the juniors did all the work. They went and decorated the place. So he dragged me along, and I was only a sophomore. And all the junior girls thought I was so nice because I came and helped, and we decorated for the prom and did all this stuff. And then, so I went to the prom with him all 3 years after that, sophomore year, junior year, and then he came home from college to take me to my senior prom when I was a senior. So I went to prom all 4 years. And Linda Smell never went to the prom. She even asked a guy her senior year, and he turned her down. So.
And how heavy did it get with John the Rabbit?
A lot of making out.
That's about it?
On my mom's couch, yeah. Yeah.
Too much of a conniver? You had some instinct going on about that?
No, just, we were good Christian kids. We were going to wait till we got married.
Gotcha. And we've touched this already, but you developed even more in sports-wise as high school went on.
That's interesting because I wanted to say that earlier and I forgot about that. It wasn't just that I was good in sports and I was better than good. I was exceptional, and I've got the scrapbooks to back it up. It was the culture of Santa Maria, which was unique. And I write about this in my autobiography. Bobby White's dad, Joe White. Bobby White was a teammate of mine and a neighbor of mine on Scott Drive, and his dad was the coach and athletic director of the junior college, which was named Allen Hancock Junior College. And he had an interesting past that, because of his past, where he was an All-American at USC guard and then went into the war and played on the military teams. They'd have the best ball players play on the teams and go around for tours to entertain the troops. Afterwards, he settled in Santa Maria because he married a Santa Maria woman and met her in college, apparently. And not only did he bring his own resources, but he brought a lot of his fellow players into Santa Maria in the 40s and 50s. I can recall going to see this semi-professional Santa Maria basketball team with Bobby White's dad on it play, and they were just superb, some of the players. And I'm talking about maybe a collection of anywhere from 8 to 12 men that came into town. And the remarkable thing is they didn't just settle in Santa Maria and raise families in Santa Maria, and this is from the mid-40s on after the war, but they got into the running of the city. The mayor or the head of the recreational department, they brought a whole new culture. And I thought it was just the norm, but after I grew up and got away from Santa Maria, I saw that most cities weren't like this, but the whole city, the culture of the city was centered on sports. Whereas you might have in a town like Phoenix a write-up of a high school team, but primarily the college and pros, the culture was such in Santa Maria that they detailed all the way down to the 5, 6, 7-year-old sport programs, and you'd get write-ups in the paper because it was so important part of the culture of sports at that time that it was glamorized. Sports was everything. And they had this, we the kids growing up, the benefit of it all, and all these older adults who seemed to multiply and were all coaching teams and starting recreational leagues and playing themselves and instituting a culture of sports that was unlike anything that I've ever seen in any other city. And I was so fortunate to be raised in Santa Maria because of that. So I got into sports a lot, but a lot of it was because of the culture, more so, I guess what I'm trying to say is, than my own ability. If the culture wasn't there, I wouldn't have developed as an athlete as much. But everything was sports. Everything was sports. Every kid I knew played sports. There weren't nerds then. There were occasional one or two that you'd see who didn't enjoy sports and didn't play, but even if you weren't good at it, you played sports everywhere. It was really unique to Santa Maria.
This is always the most fascinating part of your childhood for me, that this ever happened. Your participation in the Glee Club. Choir.
Yeah, I was in choir all through high school and junior high. And I was in the talent show in elementary school. I was in choir in elementary school, too. We had a great choir director our 6th grade year. You know, we'd have this every year, all the choirs from all the schools performed, and they'd get up and sing these little songs, you know. And our 6th grade music director, who was also a teacher, I don't think, I might have been like in 5th grade, because he was a 6th grade teacher, but I didn't have him. And I wasn't in 6th grade. I think I was in 4th grade then, and he was a 6th grade teacher, but he also conducted the choir. He had us sing When the Saints Go Marching In, and he had us march in singing that song. And it was he had us doing it very, gospel-like. And we got everyone's attention. He always won the award because he was such a great director and everything. But, you didn't have to try out. You just want to be in choir, you're in choir. So...
And so, yeah, when I got into high school, I played more sports. Is that where we are now?
Yeah.
I mean, growing up from age 6, 7 on, there was bitty basketball, there was flag football all through schools. There wasn't just schools against schools. There was recreational leagues, multiple leagues. There was for the ages of 13 to 15. That was started by a man in Santa Maria who also settled there, who happened to be the son of the great baseball player Ty Cobb. And I have a picture of a calendar out in the garage of an elderly man standing next to a kid in a baseball uniform. And
Pittsburgh Pirates.
Yeah. And I can relate to that so much because that was Mr. Cobb. And he'd come to the games, and I was that age, Little League age. And he was someone we looked up to as being Ty Cobb's son. And he started a lot of baseball programs. It was just a real neat, unique community. So I played a lot of sports growing up, both in school and outside of school as a recreational league the whole time. You were always going to sports. Bobby White's dad ran the Hancock Junior College program, which would bring in all these out-of-city players who were transitioning to universities. They were very talented, but they didn't have the grades. So because of Bobby White's dad, Joe White's connections, the coaches of these universities all knew him, and they'd send them to Hancock College to play. So we were always entertained with high-level football and mostly basketball programs. And I can remember going as a kid to watch Hancock play and see these fabulous players who went on to become big stars in universities. Always great basketball, always great sports. So that was just sort of the environment I grew up in, and it just continued in high school.
It wasn't until I was in junior high I realized I couldn't really sing, because one of my friends told me. But
how did they break that news to you?
They said, "You can't sing." And I said, "What do you mean?" And then,
like in choir?
No, we were just singing, you know, on the halls or whatever. And then I noticed my mother would
singing in the halls.
Yeah, there you go. And then my mother, one time in the kitchen, I was trying to sing, and she kept telling me I need to open my throat up more. And she finally said, "You sing like your Uncle Bob." So I put two and two together and realized I couldn't sing. But
and everyone else in your family can sing.
Yeah, but the thing I can do, and why I made choir every year in high school, except I didn't move past, they used to have Girls Glee 1, Girls Glee 2, Girls Glee 3, concert choir, and then there was the choraleers, which were like your show choir, which was like
the top,
and there was as many girls as boys, because they did a lot of dance routines with the singing, and they were really quite good. Because I came from a huge high school, so there was a lot to choose from. But when you tried out for choir, he would hit a note on the piano and you'd have to match it. And I can do that pretty well. I can kind of, you know, figure it out.
Well, that's debatable.
Well, you told me once that I had, what did you tell me? I had pitch memory was wrong. But if he did a C, you know.
Sound like a vacuum cleaner.
But Linda Smell could sing, and she didn't make choraleers, but she went all the way up to concert choir, where I never got past Girls Glee 2.
It was sort of mercy putting you in your senior year in Girls Glee 2.
Yeah, I don't know if I was even in choir my senior year. I think I stopped after my junior year, but probably too embarrassing to be with all those sophomores my senior year. But
and so high school freshman year, you were obviously football, basketball, freshman teams, and didn't you make varsity baseball when you were a freshman? Is that correct?
Yeah, not a baseball, but football. I played freshman football, but they moved me up to JVs immediately. I think out of need. I think they needed a quarterback, and the freshman season had started 2 weeks earlier than the JV, and I had looked so good as a freshman that they moved me up to JVs, and all of a sudden I was a freshman starting JV football. And I can recall we were a pretty good team. I think we only lost one game all year. And then basketball, I played JVs. They had a freshman JV, and Paul Washburn and I were exceptional enough to play JVs. And then baseball, I played varsity as a freshman, yeah. I had an interesting relationship with a freshman baseball coach by the name of Don Johnson. He came into play in my life later on, significantly, but he was the freshman baseball coach, and the varsity coach was Don Wilson, who moved me up, and so that was the beginning of my high school career.
Yeah, we had a really good music program and a great theater program, and when they did the musical when I was in school, the drama teacher and the music director work together on the musical.
Mm-hmm.
And we had some great actors in high school. In fact, one girl, they thought she was going to end up professional, but she got killed in an automobile accident.
Mm.
But that was, I don't remember what year it was, but they did 101 in the Shade,
Mm-hmm.
which is the same as The Rainmaker, but it's a musical. Oh, she was so good. I went to all those in high school. I loved going to the plays, the musical, because we had such a good... the musicals that I saw and the plays I saw in high school were as good as better than community theater. And not on Broadway's level, but pretty good. They were very, very entertaining. We had so much talent. We had so many good singers. Like I said, the choraliers.
And I'm trying to remember, there was some controversy you had or discussed about in baseball, even though you moved up to varsity, or there was a problem you had with someone. Was it the coach? Or?
It was this Don Johnson.
Yeah.
Yeah, he was the shop teacher for the high school, and he was also the assistant freshman football coach and the JV baseball coach. I think he played himself in high school or college, but he and I never got along, and it stemmed from that shop class, which he ended up giving me my lowest grade in high school, a D, and we butted heads, and I'm sure I was the contributing factor with my smart ass and smart alecky personality, not willing to put up with adults just because they were adults, but he also contributed because he was immature as an adult, and he wanted revenge, and I could see he was taking it out on me. He fought the baseball coach, moved me up to varsity because he kept telling the coach I wasn't good enough. And I ended up not only starting for the varsity baseball team, but starring.
Mm-hmm.
And in fact, my second year I got offered a professional contract. I don't know if you ever knew that, from the Pittsburgh Pirates. I made honorable mention all league my freshman year. He became the varsity coach the next year, and our relationship went from bad to worse. And by the time I was a senior, he wasn't even letting me play. That's how bad it was.
Mm-hmm.
Even though the scrapbooks will attest that I was literally the leader in Santa Maria baseball-wise. We won internationally. We beat the Mexican team. I was a star pitcher, star hitter in every league growing up. I was the most valuable player in the Middle League for the Los Angeles finals. But for some reason, when it came to him coaching me, and the reason was obvious, because he personally resented me or didn't like me, he wouldn't even literally play me. And it became upsetting to me to the point where I just gave up. I just sit on the bench and practice my juggling with baseballs. And I only stayed on that team when the football coach kept saying, why don't you just go out for track and keep your football skills going. My senior year I got selfish because I had a chance to break the Santa Maria record for the most varsity letters, because I had lettered in varsity baseball, and the other three sports I would have a chance of lettering 10 letters, varsity letters, by the time I graduated, and the record was 9 by a guy named Art Fabello, who was the legend in Santa Maria prior to me. And so I stuck with it that senior year, the last half of the senior year, when he just literally benched me. And I would do stupid stuff that would irritate him too, so it wasn't just his fault, it was my irritating too. I can remember he put me in a big rivalry game against Rigetti off the bench, and he put me into pinch hit because he was desperate, I think, and I whacked a double down the line, hit it so hard it bounced off the fence. And the Rigetti coach yelled out to me and said, "Hey, Vince, how come you're not starting?" And I yelled out, "Why don't you ask the coach over there?" Real smart aleck, and embarrassed in public. I do stuff like that too, so I probably deserved a lot of it, or brought it on myself at least. But anyway, that's why I hung out there that senior year, even though I didn't play the last half. And I got my 10 letters and set the record, but because of his vote, which was done by all the varsity coaches my senior year, they voted for the best athlete, and I should have won hands down, but he didn't vote. And my football coach told me afterwards, he said, "You're not going to get it because of this guy."
Mm-hmm.
So that was Don Johnson.
Yeah.
There was one family in particular called the Spicers, and both their kids were both in choraleer, and the parents both sang, and they sang professionally at one time. And there used to be a variety show every year that my parents were in. It was like the parents of the kids and teachers. It was teachers and parents, and each school did a number, and then they get together and perform. And they were always the stars. My parents were always in it with the Spicers because we kids all went to school together, and they always had the lead in whatever it was, the two parents, the Spicers, because they were such good singers.
Any other interesting stories from baseball you can remember?
Well, the Pirates offered me a contract after right before the beginning of my sophomore year, but I wouldn't be able to play high school baseball in any sports if I accepted the contract. It was only a couple $1,000 signing contract, and I would start going to their satellite teams, to semi-pro teams to practice. And
baseball was probably your least favorite of the three sports?
Actually, to begin with, it was my favorite growing up.
Oh.
Then basketball became my all-time favorite, and football I was just talented in. But yeah, baseball was
at that time. I dropped to third.
Yeah,
that probably was a large factor too.
Yeah, really large part.
In fact, when they're one, I think they had 3 kids, but one of them was out of high school by the time I was there. And when she got married, it was like, someone else told me about a wedding like that. Like everybody in the wedding party sang at the wedding. You know, he sang a song to the bride, the groom, because he could sing too, whoever she married. And the parents both sang while they're standing up there. You know, it was really different than anything I'd heard, but they were all great singers. So we had a really good music and theater program in high school.
And so football, you're starting quarterback sophomore year for the varsity team. Is that how it was?
No, the JV quarterback, and then my sophomore year I started defensive back. They had a real good quarterback named Jerry Conklin. So I was a second string quarterback, and I started on defense secondary. Defensive back.
Okay.
And then junior and senior, I was the starting quarterback.
Right. And you have some interesting stories from there.
A ton of them, yeah. Too much for this video.
Right.
Let me see.
A couple of them I can remember, and one of them I'll challenge medically. You talk about how you got your leg injury and you thought that led to your blood clot.
Which I'm sure you laugh at, but
yes.
Yeah, that was earlier. That was during flag football time, playing for St. Mary's against Main Street, and they had a bully kid named Ronnie Williams who was so big that you couldn't get him, and he'd run over you purposely and do mean things to you. And while I was holding the ball for the kickoff, he stood 15 yards away and started running up right before the ball was kicked, and after it was kicked he didn't go for the ball or anything. He just ran up and kicked me in the leg as hard as he could, and my leg swelled up to 2 to 3 times the size, the lower half of the leg. And I remember that vividly, and how much it swelled up, and the local Dr. Patero was amazed at it as well. But yeah, that's interesting. They got my clots in that same leg, which I'm sure is not medically related. But Ronnie Williams went on, interestingly, to become a friend of mine too, only out of necessity, because when I got to be a high school age, he was a fullback and wanted to play a lot, and I was this quarterback, both of the freshman team as him as a freshman, and then varsity. And so he wanted to be my best buddy at that time, because he hoping that I'd hand off to him more, but he didn't even start.
Yeah.
His family, he and his brother ended up owning Williams Brothers Markets, and there was like 10, 12 stores stretching from Santa Barbara up to San Luis Obispo, Williams Brothers Market. So they made a lot of money, he and his brother, running their dad's grocery store and making it grow. But yeah, that's one little anecdote.
One story you also told me about was how you got hit in the head and played a whole game and have no memory of it.
That was my freshman year, my second game as a JV starting quarterback against Ventura. and they were the powerhouse team. They were a much larger community than ours. Santa Barbara had 100,000, Ventura maybe 80,000, to Santa Maria's 20,000 people. And I remember that game in the first quarter, getting hit in the head hard and not remembering a thing afterwards. I remember we won, we upset them, and I threw 2 touchdown passes. They told me. I don't remember any of that. I was told we won. I told I played well, and that's all. I don't have any memory of the game at all.
Yeah.
And after that, I seem to remember okay, and I seem to function all well. I didn't.
The pep club was, we were like, anytime they had anything special going on with some kind of thing, we handled it. For example, homecoming. Back then, and someone talked about this on Facebook several months ago, because someone asked, were gardenias a big deal? No, not gardenias, mums, for your homecoming. And like, people nowadays are going, what? Mums homecoming, what the heck's that? But when Vivian's the one who brought it up, because it was big in Texas and it was big in California, mums were associated with homecoming, and we would sell them for guys to buy, to give to their girlfriends or whoever they wanted to take to homecoming or whatever. And so we'd put those together. We'd order the mums. We'd get the pins, that they could pin them on, and a little tag so they could write a little something on it. And a lot of guys asked the girls to go to the prom by buying them a mum. And they'd write something on the tag like, will you be my date for the prom, for the homecoming, or blah, 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 whatever, So we did stuff like that. We put stuff together and sell it for different events like that. But that's the one that sticks out in my mind the most, was the mums.
Did the Santa Maria football team ever win any state championships, or just?
My sophomore year, we made it to the playoffs. We made the playoffs my sophomore, junior, and senior year, and we got all the way to the semifinals my junior year. My sophomore year, we went to the quarterfinals, and that was when I played secondary. And my junior year, we lost in the semifinals. We were one of 4 teams left. My senior year, we had everybody back. We were the talented sophomore, junior team, and these were the kids I grew up with my whole life, and they were very, very talented athletes.
And you knew each other.
Everybody knew each other. Everybody played against each other, competing against each other in schools and rec leagues. But when we got to high school, we played together. Super talented group. Two of them went on to be All-Americans in college. Three of them played pros. But yeah, we went to the semifinals my junior year. My senior year, catastrophe hit. I was the quarterback, and we had a phenomenal running back named Bobby Kane, a phenomenal fullback named Paul Washburn. All of us went both ways, played defense and offense. In the very first game of the season, on the very first kickoff, Bobby Kane got the ball and broke his leg. He got tackled and broke his leg. And in the second game of the season, Paul Washburn broke his arm. He was out for the season. So we'd lost a big part of our offense and defense. Again, Paul was a linebacker, Bobby was a defensive back. And we ended up getting down to the season league final between us and San Luis Obispo. And we lost that final. Because we lost, we didn't go to the state playoffs.
I was too shy to try out for anything else. I would never get up in front of the student body and do a cheer or something to try to make the cheerleading squad, or get up and make a speech to run for office. And so this was a way I could contribute without having to be on the spotlight.
Where did you think that came from? You so liked to perform, it seemed.
In my bedroom.
In talent shows and in choir.
Well, in talent shows and choirs, you're with a group of people. You're not singled out. With making a speech or doing, in my high school, you had to try out in front of the whole school for cheerleading. You'd have to get up and do a routine, and then the student body voted on you. And I guess I couldn't handle rejection. I wasn't real secure in those years with myself.
Well, I'd mentioned how our senior year was so laden with great players. We had 20 players back, starters, out of 22, and we were picked to win it all. We won our first game against Ventura High School, which was a larger school, 47-0, and we were ranked second in the state because of that. And then the catastrophe hit with our backfield and 2 other key injuries, so we never did even get into the playoffs that senior year. I wore contact lenses at the time. I had been wearing them since I was, I think, 12. And when they first came out, they were the size of maybe somewhere between a nickel and a quarter. And they were hard, and they're very uncomfortable to wear, but I wanted them so badly that I didn't even notice them in my eye. I was so glad not to have to wear glasses and have jiggling while I was trying to catch a ball or get hit in the face with them as occurred while I was playing in Middle League. That was an interesting anecdote. To digress a little bit, I wore glasses and I was a pitcher, and we were playing Guadalupe All-Stars, the Santa Maria All-Stars versus Guadalupe, and it was the first or second inning, and I threw the ball and the guy hit a real good line drive right back at me and hit me in the glasses right here, and I still have a scar maybe a half-inch long underneath that eyebrow. But ever since that time, when my eyebrows grew out more, I had 2 different color eyebrows, one of the physically anomalies of me. And if we want to talk about physically anomalies, I also have the so-called stinky ear, which James is familiar with, and all my friends have endured and been smelled at least one time or another because I stuck my finger in my ear and put it near their nose. A cyst, I guess, caused it. I don't know. You know better than I do. We were talking about things that occurred in football, right?
Yes. Stinky ear did not occur in football.
You're physically
talking about your contact lens. I think you're going to go off on how that fell out during the game.
Yeah, I would lose the contact lenses because they weren't soft lenses. They popped out much more easier, and I lost. And I always had 3 or 4 pairs handy because I'd lose them in a football game. And I can remember my mom telling me that I lost one in the first half of a football game, and they made a public announcement about it, and a lot of the students and the cheerleaders came out of the stands while we were in the locker room. We were looking for it on the field, the grass field, which was like finding a needle in a haystack. They didn't find it. Had them pop out playing basketball in high school, but we could find those. I remember one finding it and the guy backing up and stepping on it and cracking it. I was always putting the lenses back on by talk about unhygienic, the lens in my mouth and wiping it off to get the dirt off and then sticking it in my eye, continuing to play. But contact lenses was a savior for me. I got away from glasses, just like eye surgery, laser surgery was for you to get away from glasses. You know the feeling yourself. You no longer have to wear glasses. But yeah, another story about football.
Part of it, I think, came from, my not thinking I was dumb, but not thinking I was very smart because I couldn't read as well as other people, and I wasn't real good with spelling and stuff like that. So I felt insecure. But a lot of people do feel insecure during those years, but there's other kids who don't.
Mm-hmm.
And you wonder why, what the difference is, but I don't know.
Okay, so
one interesting anecdote I was going to relate to you had another celebrity that came into my life, and it had to do again with Joe White in Hancock College. As I said, he was a main source to bring in these good players that didn't match up academically with the large universities and give them a transition year or two before they matriculated into a large university. And this was because of his extensive contacts in the world of basketball. And because we were so good our senior year in high school, mainly because of Steve Patterson, he was the center on our team, we would scrimmage Hancock College once a week.
Basketball we've moved on to.
Yes, I'm sorry, basketball. I'm talking
Okay.
about, and Joe White's Hancock teams, and they were very skilled players. No one was from Santa Maria. They were all out of state, and they're all state this or all city that. That just didn't have the academics. But we had a center on our team named Steve Patterson, who went on to play for John Wooden at UCLA.
During the golden 10-year decade of Wooden.
And the Cleveland Cavaliers in professional basketball. He was the most valuable player of the championship game because he had such a good game for the Cleveland Cavaliers that year. But in any case, he was 6'10", and he could provide opposition to their big guys, and we were a talented team. We went on to win the California state title that year. But one of the players that played for Hancock College at that time, and who came over and scrimmaged with us once or twice a week, was a guy named Chuck Negron, and he was all city New York. He was a shooting guard, and I guarded him. He was only a shooter, didn't dribble very well or very much. And afterwards, as was the custom in those times, but as we found out, it was no longer done when you were in high school, you would shower there after practice, actually in showers, and you had a locker room where you changed the whole bit. And all the players, Hancock and the Santa Maria kids, would shower together, and Chuck was always singing in the shower. We were always impressed with his singing, always saying, "You should record a record, Chuck. Oh, you're a good singer, da-da-da-da-da." And he had, in truthfulness, sung back in New York. He was talented and was involved in choirs or groups back there, I guess. But because he was so good in the shower, and because we were always telling him how good he was, they had a local recording studio that we suggested I didn't suggest, somebody did it, probably one of his teammates, go down and record a song. And he did, a song named John Brown, I think the name of it was, or Julie Brown. And the recording studio was 20th Century Recording, and it was a local hit. It didn't make it big nationally. I had a copy of it at one time, but I don't have it any longer. But he went on the next year down to Los Angeles State, Cal State LA, to play, and he never did pan out as a basketball player. But at Cal State LA, he met another man and also a singer, and they decided to start a group called Three Dog Night, and the rest is history.
Mm-hmm.
Chuck Negron became Chuck Rondell, I think that was his stage name.
Mm-hmm.
And they made a lot of hit songs, but I knew Chuck Negron, and I used to guard him. In fact, he was the guy I guarded at practice all the time when we scrimmaged Hancock Junior College.
There's some things that I did that surprised me. Like I just realized I didn't put it down on there, and probably because I don't think about it that much. How I ran for Miss Westminster twice,
Mm-hmm.
and I won the second time.
That was after high school, though.
No, it was in high school.
It was in high school.
I went the first time. My mom talked me into it my junior year. I was kind of scared to do it, and she talked me into it. She said, don't think about winning or losing, but think about that you gain something from it. You learn poise, you learn this and that and this and that. And
you certainly kept that. You're the poisiest person I've ever met.
Poisiest.
All these famous people back then, and I think, was it in high school, or was it your first year of college when you came back, there was another famous person you would play basketball with who was also part of the golden decade of Wooden at UCLA.
Yeah, you're referring to Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, or as he was known back then, Lou Alcindor.
Mm-hmm.
And again, our community was so talented with athletes that one great athlete named Kenny Heights didn't even go to Santa Maria High. He went to the rival school, Rigetti High. There was two high schools in Santa Maria, Rigetti High School and Santa Maria High. And Rigetti only started when I was a freshman. That was their very first year in existence. But by the time 3 years later, Rigetti High School basketball had Kenny Heights, who was a superb player, and they ended up going to CIF as we did that year, but this was my junior year. He was a year ahead of me. And Kenny, and of course, being from Santa Maria, would all the time be in the gym playing and practicing, and we got to know each other, and we played against each other a lot in high school rec leagues as well as high school teams. He went on to play for John Wooden at UCLA, the famous freshman team that actually beat the UCLA varsity team, which perhaps on the surface doesn't sound like a great accomplishment, but then when the freshmen play the varsity all the time before the season begins, usually the varsity whomps on the freshmen, or sometimes the talented freshman team will upset them. Well, this was not just an ordinary varsity UCLA team. They had won the NCAA the year before, and so they were a superior team. But Lou Alcindor was the center on that team, as he was then known. Kenny Heights was the one forward. Lynn Shackelford, who was an All-American, was the other forward. And then they had two guards that became All-Americans in college. And those 5 freshmen beat the 1 year removed NCAA UCLA team in the big preseason scrimmage. And he and Kenny became good friends, he being Lou Alcindor. And during the off season for the next 2 summers, Kenny would bring Lou up to Santa Maria for 2 to 3 weeks to stay and play basketball, because there was such a gathering of athletes who played basketball in Santa Maria, not just the high school kids, but the Hancock Junior College kids. And that's where I got to at least play with. I met him, but I'm sure he wouldn't remember me, but we played each other. We'd scrimmage each other, either 3-on-3 scrimmages, or we'd go full court 5-on-5. And I had the chance to play with Lou Alcindor when I was in high school.
Nice.
Very nice.
Mm-hmm.
So the first year I did it just for fun, and when I first started going to the meetings, I figured all of us girls were kind of on the same level, so it was kind of. And then my mother said that I came home one night, not down, but sort of like, well, forget it. I know who I know who's going to win this, because she came in a little bit late. Her name was Jamie, and she came in, a little bit later than we girls did, and she was gorgeous. She was just, you could just looked at her and said, oh my gosh, no, she's going to win it. And she did win it. She ended up winning it. But happily, I'll say that I won the Miss Personality contest. And that's...
Personality or congeniality?
No, they called it Miss Personality.
Okay.
I think I still have the trophy in there. And that's voted on by the girls.
Yeah.
So I like that, that
everyone else liked you.
That they liked me, yeah.
I had a lot of interesting people come into my life that way, which was really the spur of why I started that autobiography, and I have a whole separate chapter on interesting people I've met in my life.
Mm-hmm.
Paul Westphal was another one that I got to know at USC, and he became a famous basketball player and coach.
Mm-hmm.
Came up to Santa Maria and spent the weekend with me, staying at my house, and we went out to my dad's golf course and played golf out there a couple days. Almost got my dad kicked out of the club because of that. But we had a good time. Anyway, he was one of the athletes. Steve Prefontaine I got to know well in college. He was a famous track star. They made a movie out of him. He died at a young age. But I'm jumping ahead. We're back in high school, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
And so then the next year, when they were going to have the contest, I wasn't going to be in it again. And the Chamber of Commerce called me up and said, we want you to be in it. We want you to be our bicentennial queen. And because it was it was my senior year.
Mm-hmm.
And so it was Westminster's bicentennial year. They'd been a city for...
What?
And so I said, all right. And then,
Bicentennial or centennial?
Bicentennial.
Wow, since the 1700s, Westminster was a city.
Well, apparently so. And I ended up winning. So I still remember what my question was.
What was that?
You know, they get down to the 3 finalists, and then they ask you, I don't know if you've ever watched a beauty contest before. I used to always watch Miss America. And then they ask you a question, and it's pulled from a hat or something, or it's done, but they randomly get asked a question by the MC. And my question was, do you think, I can't remember the exact question, but it was something like, do you think that there's such thing as a generation gap? Because that was a big term back in those days. Generation gap, in other words, you know, between the adults and teenagers. I don't know if you understand what
I understand.
you
what
understand.
you're saying, yeah.
Okay. So my answer was that I wouldn't really call it a generation gap. I would call it a communication gap.
Mm-hmm. You should have been a politician.
Yeah. And I don't know where I pulled that out, but it just came out of my mouth. It was a great answer. I just
can
remember
neither
that.
confirm or deny the existence of a generation
Yes.
gap. So, closing out basketball, your senior year, I believe, correct? You guys were the state champions.
Correct.
Tell us on the path that led to that.
Well, we had an outstanding team. I was probably the 3rd best player on the team. We had 2 great players, Steve Patterson, again, who went on to a professional career and died young.
Mm-hmm.
He ended up a coach at ASU and St. Mary's College in California, but died young. He was, like I said, 6'10". Bobby White, Joe White's son, was a phenomenal player and perhaps even a better basketball player than Steve. As far as all-around ability, he just didn't have the height. He was maybe 5'10" at best. But he went on to play for Cal State Berkeley. And Bobby and I were perhaps real close for a period of time, maybe my freshman and sophomore year in college. When I'd come home, we'd always hang together. In addition to those 2 players, it was the group of kids that I grew up with from age 6, 7 on that were so superior, that allowed us to become so good in football.
Yeah, I would call it a communication gap. We need to learn how to communicate better between the generations and blah blah blah, you know, all that BS.
But you'd want to.
But the judges ate it up. Mm-hmm. They ate it up, and I won. And so I spent 2 years in parades because the first year I was Miss Personality. So they also had, besides Miss Personality, they had Miss something else. Besides the Queen and her 2 princesses, there was Miss Personality, and there was something else. The one who sold the most tickets or something like that. And we got to ride on the floats as well. And I sort of got moved up to princess that first year because one of the princesses got pregnant. And so she's starting to show, so she couldn't ride on the float anymore. So I got to be up there with the Queen. And
okay, continuing with the basketball team, because I was in a select group of athletes growing up that continued into the sports in high school, and from the basketball team we just had a lot of good talent. I could name the names, they wouldn't be recognizable, but suffice to say they were very good. Jimmy Yarborough was the other guard. In addition to Bobby White, Jimmy was famous for tennis locally. He was the Santa Maria tennis champ for adults, even though he was in high school. And he competed semi-pro tennis for a while. I don't know what happened to Jimmy Yarborough, but he was a real nice guy. We had a real good team. We had been playing together for 3 years. And our senior year, because of the coach, a brand new coach named Bob McCutcheon, who was the athletic director at Santa Maria High School, but he decided to coach basketball. And I think perhaps Steve Patterson was the pullback because he knew Steve was special. But McCutcheon did go on to coach at Hancock College after Joe White retired. And he was a big star at UC Santa Barbara in his college career. And his son, Bobby McCutcheon, I got to know. He was 2 years younger than me. He went on to play in college and ended up coaching in Phoenix, one of the high school coaches. But in any case, the combination of real good talent and a superior coach who knew how to bring us together and play successfully.
But I'll have to say my mother was right, because especially the first year I was in the contest, I learned a lot of stuff about how to walk and how to cross your legs at your ankles, and how to sit properly.
Ankles.
Yes, that's the proper way to sit. You sit with your legs together and your ankles crossed. You don't cross your legs over one another. Although I could do it, I wasn't. And
That's not ladylike to cross your legs one over another.
Apparently not. And I learned I learned a lot of stuff like that.
Interestingly, though, as good as we were, and we just went through the league like wildfire, Rigetti High School had a real good team as well. Again, Santa Maria athletes, but they had a big kid named Bobby Pierpont who was 6'9" or 6'8" and could compete with Steve. He ended up being the most valuable player in California the year after Steve won it. So that's how good Pierpont was. Our last game of the season, we had already clinched the title, and we're playing Rigetti at Rigetti, and we were pretty sure of ourselves, and we got beat by Rigetti. Not a major upset, but an upset nonetheless, because up to that time we hadn't lost, and well, we hadn't lost in league play, I should say. Earlier that year, we had played the number 2 ranked team in the state, Santa Barbara, of the 4A level. We were 3A level. They divided the levels on size of schools, and we had gotten beat bad by Santa Barbara. But they came back and played another special game, which is an interesting anecdote. I don't know if I've ever told you about the John Rudmetkin game. You'll hear about it in more detail in my autobiography, but in any case,
Put with the plugs.
John Rudmetkin was probably the best known athlete ever to come out of Santa Maria up to the time that Steve Patterson and all of us made it up to high school. John was a Russian. His family owned a firewood place outside near Betaravia.
I remember Betaravia. That's where all the cows are, and it stinks.
And he was a 6'8", wiry basketball player that not only starred in Santa Maria, but he went on to play at USC, where he was an All-American, and he was the second player chosen in the draft by the New York Knicks, where he had a pretty good first year, made all-rookie team. But then his nickname was Rudo, for Rudmetkin. He got a disease, and I can't think of the disease right now. I guess it was a kind of cancer, but I'm not sure which kind, that completely debilitated him within 12 months. So he went from all rookie, his professional career, to being restricted to bed near death. And that year was the year, our senior year. So they set up a special game to raise funds for his medical cost, Rudmetkin night, Rudo night. And he was living in Fresno at the time, restricted to the bed, I remember, but he made a recording for the game because he knew about the game. And they set up our rematch with Santa Barbara, which was again very highly ranked in the California rankings. They had a great team, and we ended up beating that team, upsetting Santa Barbara, and that sort of changed the whole season around for us. But it was a special night because at halftime they played this recording from Rudmetkin, and we were getting killed in the first half. And it was like we listened to that recording like it was a Hollywood script, and came out and beat the mighty Santa Barbara team. But
is it like the win this one for the giver
type thing?
Type thing, yeah.
I can't remember what our topic was.
They were playing the recording.
Oh, was it just on the Rudmetkin game?
Yeah.
Well, we ended up beating Santa Barbara. We listened to the recording at halftime. We got all fired up and came up and turned.
What were some
around.
of the words that were said? You remember any of the script?
You know, I have the newspaper clipping, and they say some of it, but this, don't forget your Santa Maria Saints and what that means, that kind of stuff, you know. It was a choice moment.
And you had won Miss Westminster your senior year. Was there then a Miss California contest? Or Miss Southern California?
Yes, there was many contests that were connected. And the neat thing about it, when I was Miss Westminster, and I did get to be in all these other contests, is you met all the girls from all the other cities.
Mm-hmm.
You know, not that we became good friends and stayed in touch, but you'd see each other at all these contests.
Mm-hmm.
There was Miss Orange County Fair. There was Miss Chinchilla, the Orange County Chinchilla. There was Miss Orange County that went on to Miss America. And
you mean Miss California?
Well, California and then Miss America, because there was one contest that started at the county level, state, and then went to Miss America, and then there was another one that went to Miss USA, which wasn't as prestigious as Miss America.
That's the one run by Donald Trump.
Yes.
Yeah.
Now, but it wasn't back then.
The development of the basketball team from that time on, when we beat Santa Barbara. So highly ranked in the state, we got what we needed, which was confidence, and we went and won the rest of the games up to that Rigetti game. And the Rigetti game was important because we got beat right before we started the playoffs, and it humbled us, and so we knew we had to play at a higher level to win, and that's how we won the state title. We won all the games. It's a win or go home type playoffs, just like it is in most states, I think. And those two games, the Santa Barbara Rudo game and the Rigetti upset when we lost, I think forged us as a team.
And then there was another one that went to Miss World that was a little dicey. They had us stay at a hotel.
Is Miss World like the dicey version of Miss Universe?
Yeah, probably. It was like, and it was always added to it. It was like Miss Orange County World, Miss California World, Miss World, and they had us, and the couple who ran it were kind of shady, and they had us stay at a hotel by Knott's Berry Farm for like a week. And we went to Knott's Berry Farm, and they took all these publicity pictures. We all had the same little dresses on. You know, they had dresses for us and stuff. And we had a barbecue at someone's house. But we all knew this one girl was going to win because the fix was in. It was one of those contests that you just knew the fix was in. It wasn't that she was so much more beautiful than everyone. It was the way these two promoters treated her. And we all said, well, the fix is in. She's going to win. She had like an 18-inch waist, though, I must say. And she ended up winning. It was like, okay. But, you know, we had some fun out of it.
Yeah.
So that was okay.
Interesting anecdote from that, if we're on basketball, and I think I've told you about this too, the last game we played at Long Beach State Coliseum, 22,000 people, and they played our finals match and also the 4A final match, which Santa Barbara was in. We played a team, Antelope Valley, and they had a big front line.
Right, you told me about this. I was going to ask about this.
Yeah. They had like a 6'9" center and 2 6'7" forwards. And our team was Steve Patterson, 6'10", forward Vince Libbon, 6'2".
And everyone else is shorter.
The other forward was like 6'1", and then Bobby White was 5'10", and Jimmy Yarbo was maybe 6 foot. So we were a small team, but we had Steve and Bobby, who were great. And we played them for the championship, the state championship, Antelope Valley. We ran away from them in the first half. Everybody was shocked because they picked the big, tall team. Everyone figured would trounce us.
Your coach put you on the big guy, didn't he? Because he knew you could box him out and prevent him. Is that right?
That was the... I was always the defensive player, and I understood enough at that age that to be successful, sometimes you have to be a role player. And even though I was a hot shot in all the other sports, I was relegated to third best, and I became a defensive specialist naturally because I was fast. And anyway, but yeah, I was always put on their best player, and it wasn't always just somebody my size. More often than not, it was somebody bigger and taller than me. So I developed techniques to block out the big guys so they couldn't just push me over or get rebounds over the top of me. And part of it was because of just common sense, putting your big butt in their belly so they couldn't get around you with your arms spread out, so they couldn't go around your arms and using your arms to keep them in tow. And it wasn't just that Antelope Valley team that was so good. Even the semifinal game against El Segundo, they had a big 6'6" guy that I guarded their center. And it wasn't so much that I had to score. My job was to make sure their best player didn't score. And if the guy was big, I had to block out. And yeah, I guarded the 6'7" guy in Antelope Valley, but they had the whole front line was big.
Yeah.
We had a jumping jack, 6-foot other forward. Booker was his name. We called him a black kid, and he could jump like crazy. He could stuff, even though he was just 6 foot. And that was the other guy who guarded the 6'7" guy.
Yeah.
Then I split my pants the end of the first half, and I mean I split them from the one waist to the other waist almost, and in the back.
I was a runner-up in the Miss Chinchilla contest. And then another thing too is when I was in the Miss Orange County Fair contest, that was that didn't really go on to anything, but it was a pretty one of the bigger ones. There was one gal, I don't remember her name, but she was a couple years older than us, and she was sexy more than beautiful.
Uh-huh.
And when the first time we walked out on the stage, there was one of the judges that was like, you could tell he was just like, whoa, when he looked at her, because she was a woman, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And she ended up winning. And he probably had an influence over the other judges, but you know, who cared?
Mm-hmm.
I did it all in fun. I didn't have any, you know,
High
glorious
ideas.
ambitions that I was going to go and end up being Miss America or anything. So it was just fun.
I split my pants right before halftime, from the back waistband all the way to the front crotch. And I thought for sure that my career at Santa Maria playing basketball was over with, because we didn't have substitute pants. I could ask one of the other players to give me the pants, but that wouldn't be very nice, because then he wouldn't be able to even sit on the bench with his uniform on. I didn't even tell the coach, because I feared that if he knew I would get to play the second half, I figured we were blowing these guys out anyway, that I could get by. But that whole second half, it was like I knew everybody in the whole stands was watching me and saw my big ass sticking out of my pants. And I even thought for sure one of the Antelope Valley cheerleaders was onto it, because she seemed like she kept staring at me.
Mm-hmm.
And I couldn't run quite as well or fast or jump as high, because I was afraid it would be too noticeable. And it wasn't just because of me, but it was because Antelope Valley was real talented, that they started coming back, and by the last minute or two of the game, they tied the game up. And I still hadn't told my coach. I thought, oh man, I really screwed up. Because I didn't say anything, and because of my bad play, this team came back. In reality, it wasn't just because of me, but that's the way I felt at the time. So I was really torn emotionally. We ended up winning the game. On the last couple seconds, they shot a shot, and they missed. I boxed my guy out. I got the rebound. I threw it down the court to Booker. Booker went down and scored the layup, and just as the clock ran out, so we won the game. And afterwards, I told the coach about my pants, and I pulled them off and showed him, and he couldn't believe it. He was laughing his head off. I'm sure he wouldn't be laughing if we had lost, but everybody got a good joke out of it. I played a whole halftime with the split pants. Amazing. Embarrassing.
Jamie and I became good friends. In fact, she ran and won Miss Huntington Beach too. And the reason she could do that is because she went to school. She didn't go to Westminster High School, but she went to was it Marina High School? There was another high school that was in Westminster. So that's why she could run for Miss Westminster. You could either go to school or live in the city. But she lived in Huntington Beach. So after she was Miss Westminster, she ended up running for Miss Huntington Beach, and she won that one too. But she was very talented. She never I think she was that when she was Miss Huntington Beach, she ended up being a runner-up in the Miss Orange County contest. She was a hula dancer. That was her talent. And she was really good at it. And she was so cute.
And continuing on that path to the championship, any other notable stories along the way? The semifinals, the finals?
In basketball?
Yeah.
No, they were just all exciting games, and it took Santa Maria by the storm. It was the first time they ever won a state title, so the whole city was behind us. They even came out with a special memorable album for the whole season and the up through the championship games. Have a picture on our wall of our championship team. Special notes, yeah, we all went swimming at Morro Bay after we beat them. We went swimming in their little pool that was connected to the locker room, we discovered afterwards. And the coach was mad at us because he felt our coach had kept in the starters too long, and we had beaten them terribly, like 60-20 or something like that. And so he found out we were all swimming in the pool and our jock straps are nude afterwards, and he opened up the doors so that the public could come by, and a lot of the game was practically deserted by that time, the stands I should say. But yeah, that was embarrassing. It was funny. Yeah. What else?
So the key game was that Antelope game, really. Antelope Valley game.
As far as winning the title.
Yeah.
But that was the climax, I guess you would say. The key games for us getting to that point was the Rudo game and the Rigetti game.
Yeah.
Which
after that, it was all down. It was easy in the next two levels in the finals.
After that, no, it wasn't easy. Every game was
easier, though.
Yeah. We came together. We forged as a team. Sometimes when you have championship teams, there's one incident or one game that brings you together for whatever reason. And it was the confidence from that Rigetti game, Rudo game, and it was the humbleness from the Rigetti loss that I think was the reasons we went on to win it. Fun time.
When I was up at CLU, I got together with her a couple times, and she married a guy who was a former priest, but then he was a school teacher, and I think she married him for all the wrong reasons. And then when I saw, the last time I saw her, her mom and my mom and her and I all went out to dinner because we were invited back for one of the Miss Westminster contests, as former queens. So we went up on stage and, and so we went out to dinner afterwards, and I could tell she wasn't, she expressed herself that she wasn't happy in her marriage. So hard living on a teacher's salary.
And any inkling, during high school of certain academic fields you were good at or interested? Any sign of the future attorney there?
I enjoyed history the most. I've always enjoyed history. I enjoyed English probably the second. Writing, that teacher there who I can't remember. Math I enjoyed mainly because of Mr. LaRue. Interestingly, chemistry was very difficult for me, and because it was so hard for me, I gravitated towards pharmacy as a backup career because I knew I'd take a lot of chemistry classes and I wanted to see how I could do it. Challenge was there. Challenges and dares were a large part of my life. But I was always looking for a challenge and see if I could do it and test my skills. So chemistry came into play that way, although I wasn't very good at it. But other than that, no, nothing with regard to law. Law wasn't even a consideration in my life. My goal was to be a coach and a teacher with pharmacy as a backup plan to bring in money.
Coach Libbon.
Coach Libbon.